Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 61 of the Steel City Insider podcast. It is a special episode. I am one of your hosts, Jeremy Hritz, alongside Jim Wexell. But today we have two esteemed guests, Shane Hallam and Roy Countryman, joining us here on the show. Gentlemen, how are you on this fine Tuesday?
Doing good. Thanks for having us. Always excited to talk draft. So
yeah, glad to be brought aboard. Glad to be on here with you guys talking some more draft, just like Shane said.
I feel like a proud papa here with you guys, my youngsters. I know Shane's not in the 20-year-old demographic. I think you're like 30 or 32, right?
yeah, 36. I'll take 32 though. If you want to give me that.
I'm 32, Jim. There you go.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm the old man.
Oh, geez.
Well, Jeremy, I'm surprised you didn't call this the Jeremy Hritz episode because remember last week, number 61?
That was my number, but I do have some names for you, Jim. So obviously we have. Oh, you got one. Okay.
I go ahead. Give me one of your names because I did a little research this time.
All right. Well, I'm not going to do Mason Cole because that's too predictable, but I'm going back to early 2000s, a little Tom Myslinski.
Little Tom Myslinski. I remember Tom Myslinski, fine reserve offensive lineman. And there's the Dean Caliguire because he was a local high school kid. He went to Pitt too, played for some great Pitt teams. And then there's Tyrone McGriff, good guard from the early 80s. But and there's also Marv Matuzak. But let's go to Ted Karras, 1958-59. Speaking of the Proud Papa episode, Ted Karras was a Steeler. And if you've heard of the Karras family, right? Ted Karras, I don't know if he started for the Steelers. I don't think he did. It was a good defense of 58-59. But he went to the Bears, played guard, started at guard for the Bears on the 1963 championship team that the Steelers had a good team in 63. His son, Ted Karras Jr., was a replacement player for the Redskins in 87 when they won a ring. I don't know if he won a ring, but he was part of that. And then his grandson, Ted Karras III, won 2 rings with the Patriots. He's playing with the Bengals now. He played in the Super Bowl. So all those Ted Karrases won rings. The only Karras who didn't win a ring is Ted Karras's brother, Alex Karras, Hall of Famer, 9-time Pro Bowler. And they... Okay, I'm not done with my research. Hang with me. We'll be talking draft soon enough. One more second, man. So Ted Karras, he played at IU. Ted Karras, the second, played at anyway, all these Northwestern. Ted Karras III played for Illinois, and Alex Karras played for Iowa, and another brother, Lou Karras, who played for the Redskins, played at Purdue. Well, apparently they all hated Notre Dame. That's all the Midwest. And when Alex Karras, who didn't win a ring, but he did beat Notre Dame 48-8 in 1956, he called it his biggest win. And he was quoted in the local papers as saying, the Karrases have always had a rivalry with Notre Dame. So there you go. There's your Karras, Ted Karras episode, the Proud Papa edition.
Wow. That was... we were talking about deep cuts before we got in here. That is a deep cut. And this is the Steel City Insider for a reason because of Jim's insight and the research. That was fantastic. And
I apologize.
No, that was good stuff.
I start going down rabbit holes and I can't stop.
Well, that's why I keep you on course.
One more thing. Alex Karras was drafted in 58 by the Lions, right? He became the drinking buddy wingman of one Bobby Lane. And, Alex Karras, he started in Blazing Saddles, punched a horse, was a renowned drinker. And Bobby Lane really had eye for talent, picked him up right away. Well, that's when the Lions traded him. And thus began the great Lions curse, the Bobby Lane curse when he traded him to the Steelers. And Alex Karras never did win a ring, but he did go on to drink more beer.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with drinking beer.
God. All right, I have no more Karras information.
All right, well, let's jump into it. We are going to talk all things draft here today with Shane and Roy. But before we do that, just wrapping up a couple moves made by the Steelers last week that we didn't talk about because it didn't happen last week when we recorded the show. But Keanu Neal, safety, was signed by the Steelers. And Jim, you talked a little bit about how he was named after Keanu Reeves of the Matrix, which I thought was a bit interesting. And then Braden Fiocco, I'm probably butchering that last name pronunciation, nose tackle, signed from the Chargers. Any thoughts on those two signings, gentlemen?
Well, other than Keanu Neal hated the movie The Matrix. I asked him that at his combine. We had a one-on-one. Anyway, Roy, you had him as a potential Steeler pickup. Tell me what you like about him.
Yeah, he's a thumper. He's the guy on the back end that's going to be coming down run support. He's really better facing off with tight ends in that mid to short soft zone. Not really the guy you want in center field all that much, but he's going to be a nice enforcer, with Edmonds leaving. He's going to be that nice dime, that third safety look will be able to still be enacted here with KZ, and Fitzpatrick now still being able to switch out over the top. I really like him coming in and not having to have another linebacker in that package. He's going to be nice in that soft zone underneath. Really good tackler. The only thing that's really been the bugaboo is the injury bug throughout his career because he likes throwing his body around. So I really like the Neal signing, and the Fehoko I'm really a big fan of. If you haven't had a chance yet, I know Baldinger out on Twitter has done a nice breakdown of him, but there's a lot of quality tape of him playing nose tackle last year for the Chargers. That was surprising that they non-tendered him as a restricted free agent. And I think that's a really nice pickup as a rotational defensive lineman on early rundowns.
I suppose they're still going to need a defensive lineman. Let's go to Shane. Wouldn't you, Shane? Or do you think this guy answers this question?
No, I don't think anything here answers any draft question, at this point, right? Like it's the defensive lineman, especially that, nose tackle versatile, zero tech that they can move around. I think that's going to be high on the priority list for day 2, perhaps.
Yeah. And perhaps the Steelers are not done yet in free agency. We did hear last week that Bud Dupree did visit with the Steelers, but no signing has occurred there yet. And I know we were talking before we got on air here. And Roy, you were saying that potentially that it's due to his health not working out. You want to talk a little bit about that? Why maybe Dupree hasn't signed yet?
Yeah, he's just been injured the last few years, and I'm wondering if that's not the holdup. The way it looks like him and Watt had a great relationship. I know even prior to them leaving, it seemed like he had a good relationship with the team. If he's able to come in and be the third established edge rusher, he's not going to upset Highsmith on the hierarchy here, especially with him wanting to get paid here soon. So for me, I that just to me shows like maybe it's we'll wait and see after the draft, see if your health improves and pass a physical.
Let me interject here for a minute. Speaking of Alex Karras going to Iowa, Mike Tomlin went to Iowa. Now, come on. You don't go to Iowa unless you got something out there you like, and you don't go to Iowa State. Now, yeah. I think you can go to Iowa, take a look at Campbell, take a look at the pass rusher they have. But, man, when you sneak away to Iowa State, there's somebody there. Roy, you hit a quick hitter on what you suspect, and Shane, I want to hear your opinion on that too. Speaking of outside linebackers.
Go ahead, Shane. I'll let you go first.
No, well, I think Will McDonald, the pass rusher, edge rusher, outside linebacker is obviously someone that Steelers have met with intensely. He's on that kind of first round bubble. So, you're hoping maybe he can fall to 32. If they do want to add to that pass rush room, I think that's going to be the decision. I think McDonald's he's a little smaller than I would anticipate for the defense, but that electric first step and athleticism that he brings right off the snap, I think is something you can rotate in. The Steelers would like to develop a little bit. And I also think that MJ Anderson, their defensive lineman, that could be, a late round pick, versatile 5 tech, kick inside 3 tech on some downs. I think he's a name to look for maybe in that 6th to 7th round mix if he makes it there.
Well, yeah, that's my thing. You don't go to Iowa State unless there's something you really like out there. And I understand what you're saying about the late round 5 tech. He's probably a nice fit, but I don't think they went to see him.
Right.
Really, I mean, it makes me wonder, is there something to love about Will McDonald? I don't know enough about him. I'm asking you experts.
McDonald has ridiculous bend. He's cornering around tackles. He has advanced knowledge of getting to the quarterback, and not only that, separating it from the ball. He is very lean. He needs some bulk built onto him. The other thing that's kind of a red flag, he's a little bit of an older prospect. He is 24, but it's not a big deal now with COVID, but it's just something you got to take into effect. But I like his pass rushing repertoire. He does have a lot of, counter moves. He's not just a one-trick pony, but he's going to have to hit the weight room, which for our case with the Steelers isn't always a bad thing. You might be able to snag him at 32 and be able to, we just can't keep having Watt and Highsmith playing 90+% of the snaps and edge rushers and expect them to be able to make the playoffs and have that same type of impact. So if you can get a third edge rusher, it comes in and maybe plays 20% and still is able to not have that big of a drop off with your edge rushing ability, I really think that might be a place that they can invest in. I really like McDonald's skill set, like I said, but he's just really lean. He does have advanced knowledge, though, on how to attack tackles.
Yeah, long too. I mean, his arms are almost 35 inches. I think that's a key for the Steelers too. 34 and 7/8. I think they came in at the combine. So I think that's something, if that was lower, that they wouldn't have looked at him.
Yeah. So, okay, they're not going to sign Dupree and draft this guy at 32.
Right.
But it's a hedge. But man, I don't know that Tomlin's ever made his way to Ames. Have any of you guys made your way to Ames?
Nope.
Ames, that's back in the day.
Nope. Although it might be Jim too that they went to see Anthony Johnson, who's more of a corner safety hybrid too. It's the mid to late rounds. He's a good tight end eraser kind of hybrid player. So that's another guy with Iowa State that's
mid to late rounds though.
Yeah. And the other guy could be that Hutchinson, Xavier Hutchinson, the receiver. He's a high quality pass catcher as well that they might be eyeing in the second round. To kind of combat here. It's a good size. He's well-rounded in his route running abilities, can play above the rim, and he can play also inside and out. So that might be a guy too, if you're looking for an early round selection from Ames, Xavier Hutchinson.
Okay. Well, just remember this conversation when they do draft out of Iowa State, because that is a weird trip. That's a weird trip to Tom.
Yeah.
That is a weird trip indeed. And we're already launching here into the draft conversation. So many great nuggets that have been shared already. And just kind of talking about the draft here, Shane, Roy, we look at the Steelers pre-draft visit so far, 19 of them done out of the 30 that they have that they were allotted. You have 6 offensive linemen that have come in, 6 cornerbacks, 3 wide receivers, 2 defensive linemen, 2 safeties, 1 edge. Not that we can glean anything specific from that in terms of which direction that they'll go early on, but let's talk about the early part of this draft. We know that the majority of their picks are in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round, which is a great thing. They don't have a 5th and a 6th round selection this year, but what do you guys see in their pick 17?
I think a lot is going to depend on who's there. It seems to me like they're setting up a number of contingencies, right? I think corner is going to be addressed there in the 1st or 2nd round. We all know like Joey Porter out of Penn State and Deonte Banks out of Maryland probably are the 2 1st round possibilities that check the boxes for that, physical upfront corner that the Steelers seem to be looking at. Because even the round 2 corners, Julius Brents, Kansas State, Tyreek Stevenson, Miami, Keely Ringo, Georgia, all are this kind of big, long, physical jam press corners that can do that. So I think that's a possibility if that's there. And then I think the offensive tackle position and offensive line position in general becomes there. I know Jim's a fan of Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle out of Tennessee, who I think definitely is a possibility. But they have looked at some of the interior linemen like John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, who could be in that 1st round fringe range. So I think it's about exploring all these different possibilities and then seeing who's there at 17 ultimately among these positions that are that handful in need.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Shane. I think corner's the position they're eyeballing for 17. They'd be ecstatic, I think, if one of the top tackles do fall. Paris Johnson, if he falls anywhere in range there, I think they run to the podium and grab him. Darnell Wright, I'm a huge fan of, but I'm still not convinced he might not be gone before we're on the clock as well, just the way his stock has risen. But I think Shane said something kind of interesting here. I think Porter Jr. and Deonte Banks are kind of the guys they're eyeballing at 17. But with the other guys they brought in with like the Forbes and the Stevenson and even Julius Brents, who I'm a really big fan of Julius Brents, maybe we see him drop back to the early 20s, in a completely different hallmark here of the way Khan may be doing business as GM, that maybe we go back and pick up another selection in that 5th, 6th round that we don't have on day 3. and still get a corner that they really like, which Emmanuel Forbes, if you're looking for a ball hawk in our defense, the way our corners have been playing the last few years and the way they target turnovers, Emmanuel Forbes is one of the best guys. He's just really lean. So, but he's
Really?
not afraid of throwing he's not afraid of throwing his body around.
Lean is a nice way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really lean. We need to give that kid a
166.
Happy Meal, man.
Yeah,
So we-
166 pounds. But he did, these guys, they get down so low for the combine and then they run their 40,
Right,
but they don't bench.
right.
Then they add their 4 or 5 pounds for the pro day and then they
Right.
bench.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
it's the last time they ever run the 40s. So
And the
You're
last time they,
Yeah.
if he's running 40 yards, we're all in trouble. You know what I mean? So
right.
yeah, I completely agree, Jim. A lot of this stuff, when it comes to the underwear Olympics, you kind of throw it out. I mean, I look at him playing in the SEC against some of the top receivers. He went toe to toe, and he wasn't afraid to throw his body around and run defense. I mean, yeah, in the NFL, it's going to be a durability issue against bigger, stronger, faster guys. But between him and Ringo, I'm a lot more comfortable taking Forbes than Ringo.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. And I love the Steelers historically, no matter who's been calling the shots. These like Art Rooney Jr. called them bumblebees. Like Mike Webster was 218 coming out. 218 center. They're bumblebees. A bumblebee should not be able to fly. Massive body, little wings, but somehow they do. So, James Harrison is not supposed to bull rush 6'6", 320 pounders. But so they don't care about size. Freaky, unique size hasn't scared them. And 166 pounds, this Forbes, you guys, I think Shane, you like him too, don't you? Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, the experts like him, and I haven't watched too much of them, but I'd have no problem if they like him. I'm fine with 166.
Yeah. And they need a nickelback. I mean, they need a nickelback, and he's
Yeah.
the one that fits that. And I mean, he has 6 pick sixes in his college career. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
6 of
a
them.
playmaker.
Production.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked cornerback. We talked a little bit about tackle. Let's look at 3 other positions on the defensive side of the ball where the Steelers could make a move, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. Inside backer, safety, defensive lineman. Any prospects that really jump out to Shane, Roy, that are on your radar that you think the Steelers are looking closely at?
I do think that defensive lineman is going to be addressed, right? I mean, that nose tackle position, and they're looking at versatile players that fit that. I think the reports of the love for Michigan defensive lineman Mazi Smith is definitely active. I even wouldn't be shocked if they take him at 17. I think he's gotten that late first pub in the past. But they brought in 2 guys on day 2 that I think are also good fits. Trevon Dexter from Florida, who has kind of that size, length, athleticism. He has a little bit of the smaller kind of Javon Hargrave mold where he can get that pressure up the middle, and it did that consistently in the SEC. And then Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, who's really killed the offseason, wasn't getting much publicity, had a great Senior Bowl week, but he's kind of a stout 2-gapper in that Wisconsin system where they were built on stopping the run, and he was the central cog to do it. He had to take up those 2 gaps and did it consistently. So I think if you're a Steelers fan that wants them to start stopping the run better, this is going to be a good draft, especially day 2 on Friday.
Yeah, and I'll throw.
Let me jump in, Roy, and then I'll go back to you. Shane said some things. I have limited knowledge compared to you 2 guys on this, but Dexter, I watch these guys. I watch Mazi Smith. I just wanted to fall asleep. I know he's taking on double teams, and I know he's a freak from Feldman, and he does things all of a sudden that you're like, oh, okay. And, they play next to Cam Hayward, somebody on our message board. We've got a lot of great draft takes on the message boards. And somebody made a point. You put him next to Cam Hayward with all that muscle and all that size and speed, and he's going to turn him into a player. Okay, I'm into Mazi Smith now. And then I watched Benton play against Ohio State, and I wanted to draft the Ohio State center. I thought I couldn't take more than a quarter of it. He got pushed all around. And then somebody made a case on the message board that he never gave up, and he kept playing hard the entire game. And the entire Ohio State offensive line, which is made up of possibly 5, 1st or 2nd round picks, including the freshman guard, that their focus was Benton. Okay. And then Dexter, I watched Dexter. I'm like, I don't like this guy at all. And then I thought maybe it's his number. I'm expecting more suddenness out of a number 9.
Yeah.
You know, I watch a
Fair.
number 9. I want to see more suddenness. So, and then he would make a play and you'd be like, well, wow. Okay. So I'm going to let you guys handle these D linemen because I know they need them. That's the position of need and corner, I think, a huge position of need. And they've really got to address the D line. But man, oh man, I'm just not a fan of this crop. And who's the other defensive lineman? The guy from Clemson. He had a
Breesy.
sluggish year, but he's got some suddenness to him. There's some suddenness that I like. What's his name? Breesy?
Breesy, yeah.
Okay, Roy, kind of digest all of that and give me your take on the
No,
D-line.
You're good. Breesy's a guy that he's very intriguing because if you went back 2 years ago and watched his tape, he's a completely different ball player than he is this year. He had a lot of injuries that kind of flared up throughout his career, and then he was dealing with the death of his sister this past year due to cancer. So, I mean, he had a lot of things going off the field that we can see. I mean, we just dealt with Stephon Tuitt that ultimately led
And
to
he
him
retired.
retiring. So,
Do
you
they
know
want to
how
do
much
that again, Roy? I'm sorry to trample on what you're
No.
saying, but do you really want to? I feel bad for him.
He's
and I
a great
understand it,
player.
but do you want to
it's-
deal with that again?
I wouldn't pick him in the first round. That's where I'm at with it. For a guy, for me, if I'm looking at a defensive lineman, if I'm going early, second, third round, I'm going Zach Pickens from South Carolina.
I like
Big,
him.
big, wide body. He can play 5 tech. He can slide down to that shade 1 tech inside. And that's really where we're at with the Steelers defensive line now. We don't have the 3 down linemen as per se as we play a lot anymore. It's a lot more the nickel and dime defenses. I would rather have a guy that has some pass rushing ability, can get inside, from a 3 technique to a 1, and then on base downs can slide outside or play nose if you need him. But he has the body type. He needs to add a little bit more bulk, but he's got the long arms that are over 34 inches, big hands, which is another big thing when I look for scouting is you got to have big hands as a defensive lineman, especially against them O linemen, be able to steer and clear them out of the way. It's almost 10.5 inches, I think, there. So Zach Pickens is a guy, I think maybe that 3rd round range, maybe 4th. If you can get him in the 4th, that's a steal every day of the week.
So you're saying either draft another Pickens or draft another Keanu?
Yeah, why not? Let's see. If it works once, why fix it, right?
All right, so we talked defensive lineman. Let's back up 1 layer on that defense. Let's look at inside backer. We know they made 2 signings, Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts there, the interior of that defense. Any inside backers that this team could possibly be targeting 2nd or 3rd round? Jim, I already know you mentioned the gentleman out of Iowa, but Shane and Roy, your take on the inside backers in this year's draft.
Let me jump in here first because I got a guy I absolutely love. Diane Henley from Washington State, the former wide receiver. It's plays linebacker. He can do everything you want. Got great range, got great length. He can play on passing downs. He can rush the passer. He's everything you want. And if we can get him at pick 49, it's house money. Let's make it happen. I think he's an absolute all-star, especially if we get a couple linemen up front playing well. That guy, I think he can make an immediate impact.
Before we go to Shane, let me jump in on Henley here. I saw Jordan Reed had him, is big on him, and he's a 2nd, 3rd rounder maybe.
Yeah.
Mark Bruner's up in Washington scouting. He works his butt off. Every year I ask him about the Washington tight ends, and you guys all, you know the Washington tight ends that they've turned out, and he would always tell me, this is the year. This is the guy I like. And they never listen to him. They never listen to him. So I'm hoping Bruner's all over Henley up there. And why? I know it's a Washington State player, but still, they got him up there for a reason. It's time to take him for his word.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a great inside linebacker class. I think there's a lot of talent that can fit. I like Henley a lot too. I mean, I have some fear that is commonly mocked, and I've done it too, of Trenton Simpson, the Clemson inside linebacker, going to them. I think instinctually he needs a lot of work, but he is that type of, smaller, athletic, just like Tomlin just wants to plug in that defense and get that upside. And I'm like, I don't know if Simpson's there yet, but you're probably gonna have to take him at 32, maybe falls the other 2nd round pick. And then the other player that I've recently mocked to them is DeMarvion Overshawn, the linebacker out of Texas. They interviewed at the combine. Once again, on that kind of smaller athletic side, I think he has more production instincts. Played kind of a different role this year in that Texas defense, so he's a little more downhill, but still has some of the coverage ability. I just think there's a wealth of talent at the position, but you got to watch what you pick, because I think there's a different flavor for every type of defense in there.
Our guy Anthony Jaskulski covered the Senior Bowl, and that was the first linebacker he featured was Overshawn. That's his last name, Overshawn?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, or running hit guy, right? In the Shazier mold, the Lawrence Timmons mold, the Devin Bush mold, the Mike Tomlin, will you stop taking these running hit guys? Somebody with instincts?
Yeah.
I love the kid from Cincinnati. What do you think of Pace? Roy?
Yeah, I love Pace. He'd have to be in the 4th to 5th round area for me. I'm not taking him early, but
He's
man,
small.
if you want to see a guy hit somebody like Vince Williams, yeah, you can bring him on my team. Inside the numbers and on third downs, if I want some pass rush from inside the guards right there, bring him. He's a beast at taking on blocks as well, and run defense, and he just has a knack for making plays on the ball. So you can't teach that stuff. Yeah, you might not have the measurables, but you can't measure the heart either. And a lot of them times you just gotta, when I scout, sometimes you'll just have to put a little heart emblem beside certain guys and target them on that day 3. And he's definitely one of the ones that was first with that symbol in this year.
Well, it's funny. We were talking last week about the front office. Really, Tomlin's in charge, right? It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. The coach is in charge.
Yeah.
But, the front office can do some things like really lowball Terrell Edmonds because the coach seems to keep putting him out there. Let's make the coach figure something else out. And the same thing, I think, with the inside linebackers. When he went and took Trenton Simpson out to dinner, I think the front office said, let's get 2 or 3 inside linebackers in free agency. Put an end to that.
So we covered defensive line. We covered the inside backers. Let's take a look at the safety position with Terrell Edmonds departing. Yes, they did re-sign DeMonte Casey. They brought in Keanu Neal, but they're still looking for someone at that position. Talk about the safeties in this year's class and what you're seeing on the tape.
I think it's an interesting class. I don't think it's a great group. This isn't a good year to need a starting safety to come out of this. I know that they've brought in Brian Branch, the kind of safety nickel out of Alabama, who had an okay combine, really picked it up at his pro day and had got the results that he needed. He's a great coverage safety, kind of nickel guy that you can plug in there. If he's there at 32, I think it gets interesting, even if you've already taken a corner, perhaps. But I past that, I think it's tough. I think you're looking at a reserve rotational player that those are the guys they're signing. I mean, Daniel Scott from Cal, they're bringing in for a visit, very athletic, bigger 208, run downhill tackle kind of guy, who flashed some coverage ability, but still raw in some of the footwork and technique for that. I just think it's going to be a tough safety group. And I wonder if these signings, they're looking at this group and say, we got to bring in some talent here, because there's not going to be anyone here that can come in and help us immediately.
Well, that's good. That makes sense, because if you can move Peterson around there, get a couple corners instead of safety in a corner. Get a couple corners.
Yeah,
don't you think,
exactly.
Shane?
Exactly. Yeah. Do that. To get 2 corners and bypass safety, I think that's the ideal spot.
And if you're going to take a safety, like we already kind of discussed, you're going to have versatility. But there is one safety. Jim knows it. I've already mentioned him multiple times. Sidney Brown's my guy. Every time I hear him talk, every time I watch him on tape, I put out the lofty comparison of Polamalu, but the guy just makes plays. The last guy I scouted was like that, was Mike Hilton at Ole Miss. And no matter the size, no matter who they were going up against, they always made a play. So if I'm betting on traits and the DNA, his brother, his twin brother plays at Illinois as well. He's a running back in this class. I'm taking Sidney Brown. I'd like to see him back there. I'm sure he'd be a special teams demon for the first year or two. And I'm sure he'd probably be able to get in that sub package if Keanu Neal's getting hurt. So I'd love to see him, whether it's in the slot, in the box, that short zone area. He's also an aggressive blitzer. Love to have Sidney Brown on our team.
I do know the Steelers like him. I do know that for a fact. And you can't ignore the Polamalu comparisons. I mean, he's not 4-3.
No,
He's not first round.
no.
And he doesn't pray between plays. Maybe quietly, but he's not
Right. Not over the top is what, but it's just like the impact he was
it
able
all
to make.
worked for Troy. But
Right.
this kid, and Troy was a running back.
Right.
This guy, Sidney Brown's twin brother, is a running back. So I mean, and they did move. Mother gave them up, a
Yep.
destitute mother. Same thing with Troy. Troy's mother took him to Oregon to live with brother. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Good stuff, guys. I don't know, Jeremy, where do you want to go? Do we want to hit quarterback a little bit, or do you want to wrap her up?
Yeah, let's. Well, I wanted to bring it over to the offensive side of the ball. We kind of covered the entire defense. We did talk a little bit of tackle at pick 17, but let's take a quick look at wide receiver. There has been some discussion about whether or not the Steelers will draft a wide receiver, and then also too, this is a very deep draft for tight ends. Your thoughts on the prospects at these two positions? Do they add another tight end, being that it is so deep? What are your thoughts on the offensive side of the football?
I'm working on my tight end piece for the site, and I think it's interesting. There's all these tight ends. I'm like, oh man, this would be great if the Steelers would draft this time. But then it's like, no, it's not really worth it. It's a great tight end crop. It's just not worth it when you have Pat Freiermuth there. I think it's more likely that they take a receiver they're looking at in that 3rd round range. Everyone they brought in, I think, is there. Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. We heard today they scheduled Jaden Reed from Michigan State, who's could be really good. These are good slot receivers, and that's ideally what they're looking for. So I think that's much more likely than tight end.
Yeah, if you're looking at two guys that I'm working on the receiver piece, like Shane's talking about the tight ends, two of the guys that I'm really keying in on, Tank Dell. This guy, he's very thin, but every time I see him running routes, he's blowing people away like Deontay Johnson. He's inside, 2 steps off the line of scrimmage. It's hard to get a handle on him. He's a little bit better at the catch point, maybe than Deontay. He can play inside and out. He's probably gonna play inside more due to that slight build. But a guy that's in that 4th round range, Parker Washington from Penn State. This guy, he's only about 5'10", 180, but he hits like a Mack truck for a receiver, even blocking, and he can jump out of the gym. He's not afraid of going up to the catch point, even whenever he's draped around with coverage. Really, really strong hands. I think he'd be a nice addition there at that slot position, especially since we have the top of the depth chart pretty well secure. You're not going to get an early round pick on him. So Parker Washington at Penn State and Tank Dell from Houston.
Awesome. Great stuff, guys. Anything else? Any other prospects? I know we covered a ton so far, but we could sit here and talk draft all day. But any other prospects, players you guys want to hit on? And we'll try to get you guys back here before we get to the draft. But anybody else you want to hit on real quickly?
I like the centers, but they signed about 12 centers in free agency. I mean, the John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota and the guy from Wisconsin, the guy from Michigan, the guy from no wonder none of these Big Ten nose tackles got any movement. The Ohio State center is good. But again, it's not really a need, even though it's a crying need if you want to continue the great legacy here. But anyway, that's all I have to add. And DeJuan Jones, I think, would make a nice pick 49. That would satisfy my tackle itch. They need a 3rd tackle. So I don't know. Your guys' opinions on those?
I think the center group is great, but like you said, it just seems like they're not going in that direction despite bringing a ton of interior linemen in. But it's a good group. I love DeJuan Jones. I think that right tackle spot is interesting to get a swing guy, and why not swing for the guy that's got what the 8th biggest hands in NFL history? Just bring him in and pop him in there.
Yeah, there's 2 linemen. If you're looking for a guy that I'd like to see for depth, since we're talking about centers, guards, John Gaines from UCLA. He played up and down all 5 positions while he was at UCLA. I think his best position is probably at center. But as a 6th lineman, he'd get a hat. He's high quality across the board at passing and run blocking out there. As far as tackles, Jim, I love Carter Warren from Pitt. He's really not getting a lot of pub, being he was out this year. He only played up, I think it was 3 games, but he was a sturdy pass protector for 3 years at Pitt, and a lot of good reps protecting the blind side for Kenny Pickett. He can also play right tackle. He has some snaps there over his career, so that'd be a guy maybe the 3rd, 4th round come in.
The
But
guy, I just thought of another guy that really impresses me every time I watch him in a Rodney Hudson kind of way is Steve Avila from TCU. That's another guy that handled Mozzie Smith.
yeah, and he can play guard or center. So that's
He-
I think if you're going to get an interior guy, I think you're going to get a guy that's going to play 2 positions, or is maybe best at center, but has that versatility, year one that he can play both.
Yeah, just are you going to use a 2nd round pick on it? That's
Right.
the
Exactly.
question, because that's what all these guys are probably going to cost you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, great stuff, Shane and Roy and Jim. I learned something new about you every week. Now I know you have a tackle itch. So I didn't know that for this year. That's good to know.
Well, I've come off Darnell Wright. I mean, I was a Darnell Wright at 17, live free or die. But yeah, I'm in the cornerback group now, and Deontay Banks, I could even see that at pick 17. The film of him pushing the Ohio State receiver back 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage, it's just too much. The thing is, he and Porter, same thing, only 1 career pick.
Yeah,
you kind of and I think Porter has only 1 pick, but I think he has his dad's hands. His dad had good hands. Banks, I don't think has good hands. I've seen the ball clanging off his hands.
He's not catching anything. So.
He's Ike.
No.
He's
Yep.
Ike.
He would be Ike.
Hey, that wouldn't be a bad thing. But
True.
that's going to do it for episode number 61. Shane, Roy, can you talk about where listeners, viewers can check out your work, any social media handles where they can follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, and you can see some of my other draft work over at draftcountdown.com.
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at Preacher Boy Roy. I'm a lay pastor on the side, so that's why it's at Preacher Boy Roy. And I also have my own website like Shane. It's www.prospectencyclopedia.com. It's Big Country Scouting. That's my website, and of course as well 24/7 there with Jim. It's great, been working for him the last few years and doing all these draft previews.
Awesome. And you can check out Jim's work at the Steel City Insider. Give Jim a follow on Twitter at Jim Wexell. You can check out my work at thestillstudy.com. Give me a follow at Still Study. We will have Shane and Roy back on before the draft. Jim, anything before we wrap up?
Well, let's hit the book On the Clock, Pittsburgh Steelers, my draft book. It came out last November, but this is the time when people should buy it. And you want to go down rabbit holes, a little more entertaining than the Karras rabbit hole, but that was the Proud Papa edition. So number 61, Ted Karras from 1958. But also, I tell you what, I didn't want to plug a book I just read. The Tunch Ilkin book, In the Locker Room, really surprised me. I don't know if it's because Tunch has passed, that I really, it was an emotional read for me, and it was so good. And maybe I didn't get it when it came out because Tunch was always on, and we were always hearing Tunch, and we knew what Tunch was thinking. Well, now I miss Tunch, and that book, In the Locker Room, is so good. So if you're not going to buy my book, get Tunch's book. I don't know that anybody's going to make any money off it. I don't know if it goes to Tunch's widow, but really good read, really good stuff. So that's my plug for the day. And
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. I thought this was an excellent show, Jeremy. Nice job.
Awesome. Great work by everybody. We'll put the link for both books in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. And we will see you back here next week, episode number 62 of the Steel City Insider podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support.